By the time he got to high school, he was just this exceptional drummer. By the end of college, he was a composer, he was a songwriter, and that's when things exploded. Waltz for Addicts, it's this piece that he wrote in college that ended up being the soundtrack for an animated film. And then he was diagnosed with cancer. And he said to me, Dad, there's this piece of music. I never finished it, and I'm thinking I want to try to finish it. And it's beautiful when you listen to the music, knowing that that was all done in the last year of his life.
When life paints a picture.
You know, I was going back into our texts from last year after Mac passed away, and I was going through those just earlier this morning, and oh man, they were just like bringing tears to my eyes. And I remember sitting there when we were going back and forth on text, and I was supposed to be writing the last novel, and instead I was just captivated by this beautiful and just this emotional and this powerful music of Max, and just what an incredible human being he was. So
Jack, thank you. That means a lot, bud.
well, I mean, it's and what a gift to leave for him to leave behind right here. This is my the first album right here that I have. The second one is on pre-order, and I think comes they start shipping on November 10th, I think, which is Mac's birthday and U.S. Marine Corps birthday, of course. Is that right? Wow, amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the best way to start off is just tell me a little bit about Mac, about growing up, some of those first memories you have of him with a drum set, his path to USC and his connection to music.
Well, he was a natural. I mean, he was a very, he was a wonderful son and just a very kind and, funny youngster. And he was always sort of pounding on things. I remember, and my wife and I looked at each other and decided him to get him a drum set when he was about 9 years old. And luckily we had a basement. We could put him down there in the basement.
Yeah, I think you need a separate room for that for all parents listening. I thought that was always like the best kind of almost revenge gift to get like a brother or a sister when they have kids is for Christmas, get their child a big drum set as a way to get them back for anything that happened as siblings growing up. I always thought, but you went right in, you did it. So it wasn't a gift. You actually gave it to your own son.
I went and got him a little drum set, a little starter kit. That's what it was. Yeah, all the basic things. You got a floor tom tom, and a mounted tom tom on the bass drum, and then you got a snare, and you got a hi hat and a cymbal. It was just very simple. Um, and I'm a musician and can bang around on the drums a little bit. So he was 9 years old, and I sat him down on a set, and I taught him the basic rock beat, which is four on the floor. You just start doing, tapping your foot on the bass drum, and then you go two and four on the snare drum, and then you do eighth notes on the hi-hat. Boom, boom, bop, bop, boom, boom, bop, boom, 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 bop, and it's a basic rock beat. And he could do it like right away.
Yeah.
He put it together. He had really good time, and he could coordinate all his limbs right away. And I thought, well, this is pretty cool. So I put on a record. A friend of mine had recorded something, just a simple rock tune with that beat, and I put it on, and he played along with it and just got into it, and you could see he had just found like this thing that he loved. And then he played in church, and he played at school, and then up into high school. He started playing with the other, players, guitar players, rock players, and had several different rock bands in high school. He played in a marching band. He was just, very, very gifted. I mean, by the time he got to high school, he was just this exceptional drummer, really good. I have a video of him playing with my band the very first time. We put him on the stage when he was 15 years old. And I said, Mac, learn Boys of Summer. Remember that great tune,
Yeah.
Boys of Summer? He learned the song, and then I told him to to also make a 5 minute drum solo. After the song is over, you just launch into a drum solo and play for 5 minutes. And he brought the house down, and and thankfully I have a video of it, of him playing that very first time with my band. And then he just got better and better and better and better. And he was playing with some pretty good drum teachers, I must say. I had access to some pretty good players. So
Yeah,
uh,
you're in Los Angeles at this time, right? So
yeah, we're living in Los Angeles. My drummer is a drummer named Danny Gottlieb, he's one of the greats. Everybody knows Danny. He's one of the greats, and him and his wife Beth are both percussionists. And they met Mac when he was about 11 years old, and Mac went to one of their drum camps, and they lived in Florida and some, Alabama and different places. So they didn't see him very much. But when they would see him, it was all about drums and everything. I'd bring him to some of my shows, and he'd talk to Danny. And then I got him together with a guy named Greg Bissonette, who is another one of the greats. And Greg, he met through another friend of his and a friend of mine. And both Danny and Greg really were tremendous mentors for him. And he played with another great drummer named Jamie Tate. And he had some very, very good teachers. And once you got into college, I mean, it was off to the races. He was playing with a lot of different people in college, but college kind of shaped him in a way that we couldn't really have predicted. He was a drummer going into college. By the end of college, he was a composer, he was a songwriter, he was writing music he wanted to write music for movies. And you'll see some of the stuff on the YouTube channel. I don't know if you've had a chance to
oh yeah.
look at Waltz for Addicts. It's this piece that he wrote in college, and it's a beautiful, haunting melody, and a very haunting piece that he wrote that ended up being the soundtrack for an animated film.
Yeah, I
So
saw that. And he wasn't going to college. This wasn't just a side thing he did at college. He went to college for this. Is that right?
yeah, yeah, Jack, you're right about that. So he graduated high school, and then went to community college, Valley College in the Valley in Southern California for 1 year for his first year. And then he went into USC 2010, 2011, that class. And he went into USC Thornton School of Music. I think it was his drum teacher, Greg Bissonette, who may have even recommended that he think about that. And Greg wrote a beautiful letter, to try to get him in. It was a very tough program to get in. You got to have really good grades to get in there and everything like that. You have to audition. He made an audition tape and all this stuff, but he was able to get into USC, and that's when things exploded. He had three other drummers were his roommates, so there were four drummers, all sharing a place together during college. They became very, very close, and on Resurrection and Revival Part Two, when I started discovering this music, after he died, I went into his files and I started discovering this music. Well, I discovered not only things that he'd written after college, but things that he wrote in college and recorded at school that were just tucked away, these like musical treasures. And so this record spans everything from like the last song he wrote last year all the way back to 2011 or so, to some of the first music he wrote and plays drums on. There's a lot of music on the new record.
I can't wait to listen to the whole thing, and people can go to the Gary Sinise Foundation, and it's right there. And he wanted all the proceeds to go to the Gary Sinise Foundation as
He
well.
did he did for the first record, which came out earlier this year. Um, he had a very serious cancer, Jack, and he was diagnosed in 2018, and it's a cancer called chordoma, and it affects very few people every year. It's very, very rare. In fact, maybe 300 people per year in the US are diagnosed with this. It starts in the spine. Quite often they can go in there and get the tumor out, and and it's gone, it's cured. But about 30% of the time, it comes back to those who have had that tumor removed. He had his initial tumor taken out in September of 2018, and then May of 2019, we found out the cancer had returned and it was spreading, and things got harder and harder from that point. So we didn't, music started to fade because he was into the cancer fight. Just didn't think much about music or playing. The cancer disabled him to the point where he was kind of confined to a hospital bed or a wheelchair. But then last year, Jack, the reason that album you have there exists is because he started thinking about revisiting a piece of music that's on that record called Arctic Circles, that he had written in college but never finished. And he said to me, probably February of last year, Dad, there's this piece of music. I never finished it, and I'm thinking I want to try to finish it. And he asked if I thought one of my band members would help him sort of flesh it out and work it out. And so I said, absolutely. He was very close with my band members because he grew up around the band. He would sit in with us from time to time. When my drummer, Danny, couldn't be there, Mac was my go-to drummer. So he was close with a lot of the band members. And he went to work with my violin player, Dan Myers, who started to help him flesh out this piece. Then my piano player, Ben Lewis, got involved and started to help him because it's a piano-centric piece. If you've heard that piece, Jack, it starts with piano, this beautiful melody. And so Ben started to help him flesh it out. And then his old buddy from college, Oliver Schnee, who's a composer himself and a orchestrator, he out of the blue he started to contact Mac, and Mac said, well, I'm disabled. He said, do you want to meet for lunch somewhere? And Mac said, well, I can't really do that. Come on over to the house. So Oliver came over to the house. They started their friendship up again. Mac started telling them about what was going on with him, and Oliver started talking to him about music, and then Mac played him this piece that they had been working on. And Oliver said, I'll help you finish it. Oh, this is great, and all that. They really just went to work on that. And last summer, um, let's see, the summer of 2023,
2023, yeah.
they went into the studio, a very famous, well-known studio in California and in Hollywood called Sunset Sound. Everybody's recorded in there, the Beatles and everybody else. And this was a very cool thing for Mac to be going in there with an orchestra playing his music that he wrote in college that he's now finished. It was the videos are on his YouTube channel. I think you may show one here, but
Let's do it. Let's listen to it. Can we get that going?
Arctic Circles is what started this whole ball rolling. He started working on that piece, and then, um, they finished it along with another piece that day. And those that Arctic Circles has had over 150,000 views. It makes me cry when I hear that one.
I know, me too.
You can see in the video that I'm like very moved and emotional because I had not heard any of the music prior to that moment. And when I first heard what Mac had written and how it all came together there with the orchestra and everything, I was so touched and so moved. And I'm sitting there with my son, and he's kind of working on the score, and he's looking at it, and he's working with Oliver, listening to it and everything. And I'm just like a bawling mess. And my mom was there, my daughter. Mac wanted to pick a day to record that our daughter Sophie would be in town. And so he picked July 17th, 2023, because she was going to be in town. So she's there in the video as well. And it was just a very moving, powerful thing. And then there's another piece that you can see. Maybe you're showing it. I don't know. The Shenandoah, where
Yeah,
he played harmonica.
I want to get to that one because that one also, oh my goodness, so beautiful, so powerful. There's some other things I want to talk about with Shenandoah in particular.
Okay.
But in the lead up to that, to the summer of 2023, you and your family are going through all of this with Mac. Your wife has also is diagnosed with cancer. Your father has a stroke. I mean, you are hit again and again and again over this time period. How did you deal with that personally and as a family?
Yeah, that summer of 2018 was a killer. We found out that my wife had stage 3 breast cancer. She immediately had to start treatment. She had some surgery. Thankfully, she had a lumpectomy, which doesn't mean you have to lose the breast or anything, but she had 19 lymph nodes removed. 5 of them were infected. So she had to go into chemo and radiation. She had her first chemo treatment, and it just knocked her socks out. I was calling the doctor in the middle of the night. She's really, this isn't good. And so he said, bring her in first thing in the morning to the ER. And she ended up in the ER after the first chemo treatment. And she was in the hospital for 2 or 3 days after that first chemo treatment. Well, she's going to have more chemo. So I remember got her back home, and we're sitting outside in the backyard, and we're discussing, you know, some of the things that the doctor had recommended, that she try to help her get through chemo. And Mac had been having this pain in his tailbone, and it was getting worse and worse. And so that morning, at the same time, I'm sitting outside with my wife talking about how we're going to get through her chemo. We had sent Mac down to Moira's spine surgeon. She's had, multiple spine surgeries. Um, and he's a very good spine surgeon. We sent Mac down. Can you take a look at Mac and see, he's having all this pain. So I'm sitting there with my wife talking about her chemo and what we're going to do. And I get a call from the doctor, and he said, Mac has a tumor on his sacrum. And they did a CT scan on him, and the doctor said, I'm sending him to the MRI machine so I can get a better look. And so I jumped in the car and went down to meet him and meet Mac at the MRI. And then we went back to the doctor's office, and there was this big, big tumor like this wrapped around his sacrum. And Mac had been struggling for quite a while with pain, and we thought it was from a biking accident. He had slammed the brakes and kind of jammed his tailbone into the seat, and maybe there was a bruise there, a fracture or something. We had sent him to our primary care doctor who, put him on some Tylenol and physical therapy, and, but we didn't do any CTs on him until he went to the spine surgeon. And there it was, this giant tumor that likely had been growing for, I mean, it could have been there since Mac was born. It's a very, very slow growing tumor, a very rare tumor. Not a lot of doctors even know about it. Many doctors have not had any experience with it. The spine surgeon that we know said, "Well, I've seen them before, but I really haven't unwrapped one of these things off a spine before." But there's an expert at UCLA who's had a lot of experience with this, and so we went to him, and he removed the tumor in September of 2018. 2019, the cancer came back, and we started a series of chemo and radiation treatments, and there are no drugs to fight this particular cancer. So we were just throwing everything we could at it over the next several years. And over the course of that time, uh, Mac became more and more disabled. He had to have more spine surgeries. As I said, 2019 was a tough year, but early 2020, we knew that Mac had to now go back into the hospital to have more tumor removed that had started to spread on his spine. And right before he went back in, Jack, he was getting concerned because he worked for the Gary Sinise Foundation, started working for me and the foundation in 2017. He was loving it, loved our programs, loved working with the veterans and the people that we serve at the Gary Sinise Foundation. He was writing music for some of our foundation videos, but he was concerned that things were going to get harder and he might not be able to come to the office. So he thought, I'm going to do a podcast for the foundation. So if you go on the website, you'll now see the first two podcasts that Mac did were audio podcasts, no cameras. He interviewed our videographer who had followed me around for years and, been all over the world with me. And then he interviewed me. I was the episode 2. And then shortly after we did that interview, Mac went back into the hospital. He was in the hospital for 2 months, came out for 2, and went back in for 4 for another spine surgery. And that year he became very, very disabled, couldn't work for the foundation anymore, couldn't do any music stuff anymore. And it was all about fighting cancer at that time. So thankfully, to answer your question about how did I kind of make it through my father having a stroke and taking care of my mom and you know, my wife and son. Thankfully, Moira, my wife, the radiation and chemo that she had sent her into remission. She's been cancer free ever since. Unfortunately for Mac, though, things got much harder for him. I lost my dad in 2021. A lot of things were happening, and it was like gut punches coming at me every which way. And our family has a lot of faith, and we that helped us through quite a bit. Mac was a very strong Catholic faith guy, and our family kind of grew up with that. And the way he dealt with it, Jack, was just it was remarkably graceful and accepting. And you never heard Mac kind of complaining about what he'd been dealt or anything like that. The complaints came when he was in pain and he needed more pain medication and something like that. And so, but like, why has this happened to me? And damn, I can't do this anymore. I can't do that. You never heard Mac doing any of that. He was smiling through it as best he could and took it on the chin as best he could, even though his body was failing. His spirit was strong. His mind was sharp. He was very, very well read. Was a strong Catholic faith guy, and that helped us. That helped me, just seeing how he was dealing with it. To answer your question, that Mac kept us all very strong in the way he dealt with it, and I learned so much from our son. I mean, it was, and so now I'm just kind of on this mission to kind of preserve this beautiful stuff that he created and get it out to the world and let share it with the world.
Yeah. And you didn't talk about any of this while you were going through it publicly. At the same time, you're essentially running a foundation. You are you have the band. You're still doing so much for our troops, for veterans that are dealing with all the things they're dealing with in the aftermath of Iraq and Afghanistan in particular. You're acting. You're doing all of these things while at the same time you are juggling Mac, your wife, your father, your mom, all of these things at the same time. Yet anytime I saw you publicly during those times, you would never have even thought that there could be anything else going on. And I guess that the question is that compartmentalizing things for you? Did one help you with the other, or what was that like to spend essentially 5 years, 5.5 years, not talking about something that you're must be thinking of 24/7, and doing all these things for other people, for veterans through the Gary Sinise Foundation? You're doing so much for others, while at the same time you're dealing with a parent's worst nightmare.
You know, there's a line in my book that I wrote a book, Jack. Not
I have
nearly
it.
as
I have
as
it.
you. But I wrote a book in 2019. Actually, the book came out right in I was finishing it right when we found out all this cancer was hitting us. And so I finished the book, and there's a line in the book that I either heard the priest say uh, at this prayer service about 3 days after 9/11. Remember after September 11th, the George Bush kind of made he said Friday, I mean, just within days, Friday we are going, we want to have a national prayer service for the victims of 9/11. And so the churches everywhere were just filled. People were trying to process what we just been through as a country and the things we'd seen on television, all of that. And we went to our little church, and I remember just sobbing, my heart's breaking, and the images of people, the build jumping out of the building. I mean, all the crazy stuff that we remembered from that terrible day. All those images are just replaying over and over. And I remember either hearing this or just getting this message about service being about the healing components of service work. And I discovered that at that time, for this broken heart over what had happened to our country and the families that had suffered through all that, and then the service members who were raising their hand and deploying, and now they're getting hurt, and now their families are dealing with it, and all that stuff. I just started volunteering to to do things. And the more I did, the more I wanted to do. And it became very healing. And there's a line in my book where I say service is a great healer. And it is for a broken heart. So I started to pour myself into trying to help our troops overseas, go into the war zones, all that stuff, the hospitals, all those things. My family was very supportive of it. My children spent a lot of time without me because I would either be shooting a TV series or getting on an airplane and going to some hospital, war zone, or concert thing on military bases, whatever. Um, but they were also they wanted me to do it. My wife had two brothers in Vietnam. Her sister's husband was in Vietnam. She remembered very well what it was like to come home from Vietnam and not have any support, not have people patting you on the back and telling you good job and all that. So she was very much in favor of me going out there and doing that for our active duty deploying to Iraq and Afghanistan. And the more I did that, Jack, the more I wanted to do. I started going to hospitals and doing events at hospitals, and then all that stuff started to manifest itself into support for many different military charities and nonprofits and first responder organizations. And the more I did, the more I wanted to do, the more I could see that, well, it's making a difference. I'm actually showing up for a lot of this stuff actually is having an impact, and it's having a positive impact, which makes you want to do more of it. If I had gone out there a bunch of times and nobody cared that I was there or doing any of it, then I probably wouldn't have kept going. But I could see that it was bringing people, it was raising people up, going to play for the families on military bases who's the entire battalion is deployed somewhere, and that all these spouses and kids and everything, they're still left behind here to deal with worry about their loved one who's over in the war zone. So me showing up and playing some music can change the whole temperature, right? And that made me feel good that I was actually doing something. So throughout the cancer fight, I not only wanted to find those ways to continue the mission, because throughout the heartbreak of 9/11 for me, I found that service was a great healer. And now my heart is breaking over what's happening to our son and the challenges there. And my foundation is now very, very strong, and it's doing things everywhere. And I needed to continue that in some way, not, and Mac wanted me to continue that.
Yeah.
So I did back off. I had to back off from acting, Jack. The last thing I did was at the end of 2019. And as I said, 2020 brought two major spine surgeries and our son being disabled now and in a wheelchair. And so thankfully, I'd done some good TV and made some money and could afford to just step back, focus on my family, and do the work of the foundation. Uh, even though it was in a reduced capacity, I couldn't travel nearly as much or do nearly as much because being away from home became a little tougher now that we have these serious health challenges.
Yeah. And yeah, actually, before we ever talked about it, before I knew what was going on with your family and Mac, there was a Hollywood connection. Your name came up for something that I was involved in, and it came up as, when the casting agents go through all the people that you put out there as the executive production team, and it came back unavailable. It said, and I was like, oh, interesting. It's either he's doing something, but I don't see you're doing anything right now. So I was like, I wonder what's happening. But I mean,
That was it. That was it, Jack. The only things I was making myself available for to kind of bring some money in were, the occasional one-off speech or something like that,
right.
a book signing or something like that.
Yeah. And so Mac finds his way back to music in early 2023. You record Arctic Circles in July. You hear it for the first time, July 2023. And then you move into November of 2023. And I think it was on November 10th again, Mac's birthday and U.S. Marine Corps birthday, where you record Shenandoah. And that is so beautiful. Once again, brought me to tears the first time that I listened to it. And again, every time I listen to it. And there's a Vietnam connection to that song as well that I want to ask you about, but let's play it.
you see him playing a harmonica there, which was just beautiful. And it was, he loved music. And um, he started, his mom said, well, you can't play drums anymore. It's hard to play piano because his fingers on his right hand weren't working because of the spine surgery. It affected the nerves and everything. Um, but his mom said, how about getting a harmonica? Suggested that he get a harmonica. And so Matt got a harmonica and he started playing, started teaching himself how to play. Um, and if you want, I'll just segue right into that story of,
Yeah, Sammy Davis and
yep.
Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam. How did that how did that connection come about?
So I met Sammy years ago through the Medal of Honor Society. I've been very involved with the society going back. They gave me an award in 2007 for playing Lieutenant Dan and doing all this stuff with the troops and everything like that. And the following year, I teamed up with them and uh, we did a bunch of events over the next 5 years at the Reagan Library, and I just got very close with a lot of the recipients. Still am very close with them. One of them is Sammy Davis, who is actually, when you see the moment in Forest Gump where Forrest Gump gets the medal put around his neck, that is actual footage that they took of Sammy getting the medal put around his neck, and they took Tom Hanks's face and put it on Sammy's face. So it looks like Tom is getting
Yeah.
the medal, and that's actually Sammy getting the medal. So we
Wow.
became good pals. Sammy became an ambassador for my foundation, and he started coming to events, and he would get up and tell his story of being in the jungles of Vietnam and getting a package from his mom, and it was a harmonica, and he didn't know how to play it, but he started learning. And and he's out in the boonies, and he's in this hole, and it's raining. He's down in this hole just guarding things, and his sergeant came by and said, "Do you know how to play Shenandoah?" And Sammy said, "No, sir, I don't." He said, "Well, you better learn it," you know. And so Sammy went to work on learning Shenandoah, and he plays it beautifully. And he's played it at many events for me over the years that we've done. He tells that story. And so I got a video of Sammy playing it, and I said, "Mac, watch this video of Sammy and learn it." And so Mac learned it on his own, and he would talk to Sammy a little bit about it. And then when we were going to go into the studio, he and his buddy Oliver, who they'd created Arctic Circles, finished that up. I said, "Mac, have Oliver do a string arrangement to back you up on the harmonica playing Shenandoah. We're going to be there. You're going to have the strings there anyway. We're going to have time." So Oliver did a beautiful string arrangement, backing Mac up, and Mac plays this beautiful version of Shenandoah that you heard there.
It sure is. It's so beautiful. And there was speaking of Sammy Davis, correct me if I'm wrong here. So I met him, I haven't seen him in years, but I met him, I think over a decade ago, a couple times in the period of a few years. And I think he told me, or someone told me, that in all the events that he's been doing over these years, he always brings his wife with him every single time. Is that right?
Yeah. Dixie, yeah.
Yeah.
They've been together a long time. They each lost their spouse before, and then came together. It's a beautiful story. In
Yeah.
fact, if you look at the Gary Sinise Foundation podcast, that we resurrected it after Mac died. I wanted to bring it back in his honor. So now we do a podcast at the Gary Sinise Foundation, and one of the episodes is Sammy and Dixie, and
Amazing.
he plays Shenandoah
Oh,
in Mac's honor on that podcast. And they go everywhere together. They're a team. And they do. I think they travel 200 days a year or something. I mean, they're nonstop going out there doing things.
incredible. Incredible. And also on that day, I think there was a surprise guest, if I'm not mistaken, with Harry Connick Jr. dropping by.
Oh, that was beautiful. So those videos are on the YouTube channel. It's Max Sinise YouTube.
Yeah.
And when we were at Blackbird Studio in Nashville, another very famous studio that everybody's recorded in. And we were at Blackbird that day, and Mac, he wanted to have a day. Part of what he wanted to do with his first album, the one you have there, is have a day with my band because he loved my band members. He'd played with my band, he's close with a lot of them. And he wanted to have a special day with the band recording. So we went into the studio on his birthday, November 10th, and while we were recording some of the music there that you see on the record, one is the an old tune called Red River Valley, and Mac's mom used to sing that to him when he was a little boy, and Mac wanted to put it on the record, and he wanted to play with me, so I play bass on it, and he plays harmonica. My band is on the record. It's a beautiful version. There's beautiful stuff there. But while we were there recording, there's another studio over here, and guess who's recording in the other studio? In walks Harry Connick, and he sits down, starts talking to Mac about the record. The cameras are rolling the whole time, recording everything. It's Mac's birthday. Harry puts on a birthday hat, talks to Mac about music, and it was so beautiful. I just kind of stepped back and just let the two of them, because Harry was really wanted to know what Mac was doing, and he was so not just nice as could be and lovely. And you can see it all there. It's a birthday video. The music that is on that video that you've seen with Harry is another song that Mac wrote called Eyes of Marigold. He wrote it in college, and it's a beautiful ballad version of that song, uh, uh, performed by one of my band members, Dan, who helped him, and who I mentioned helped him flesh out Arctic Circles. And Dan plays with another guy, Levi Britton. And I asked them if they would. This was a song that Mac wrote in college. I had a tape of it. I gave it to them. I said, "Will you guys surprise Mac by doing a version of it?" Well, they not only did the up-tempo version, which is what Mac had wrote, but they did a beautiful ballad version that's on the first record. And so on the second record, part two, I put the up-tempo version of Eyes of Marigold on that. But the ballad version backs up the Harry Connick video, and it's really beautiful.
Amazing. And if we can play some of that, we'll put that in this as well, so people get a chance to see it, and then go to Max Sinise on YouTube to watch the entire thing, because it's
Oh,
there's so much joy in that video, in particular with Harry Connick coming in and the birthday hats and the whole thing. It's just beautiful.
All these tunes kind of are a vehicle for just everybody, just having a
being
great
together and
experience.
playing.
Great memories together. I just wanted to have a really great experience with everybody together, and where we could all just have fun.
Yo, it's
Maybe.
happening. There's more people in the studio than I know. It's like partying here.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Mac being a man of faith. Did you guys talk about that during this journey?
Yeah. We prayed every night that, before Moira and I would be in there with them, and we would pray with them. Quite often, Mac would lead the prayer. He wanted to. He was big St. Augustine guy, and had a beautiful St. Augustine book, and he would pull St. Augustine prayers out. Mac went through some challenging times back just post college, and he wasn't really happy doing the touring thing. He toured Europe, and he went to the Philippines, and he did all this music stuff, and went around the States and everything. And I don't think he was happy. And he, kind of wanted to regroup a bit. And so my wife introduced him to a Catholic kind of mentor therapist. Mac had gone to Catholic school when he was younger. He went to Notre Dame High School in Sherman Oaks, California. But then, went off and whatever. But he really wanted, he was searching, for something fulfilling and more than what he was getting with kind of being in the music scene, the touring scene. He really wanted to compose music for films and stuff like that. But he was a drummer and he was an exceptional drummer. So he was getting hired to drum. But he started seeing this therapist who started giving him some really interesting, good things to read, like Chesterton. Um, he was reading a lot of Chesterton. He was reading, St. Augustine. I mean, he really started to 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 kind of find himself in a way. And then he wanted to be, he wanted to be confirmed into the Catholic Church. When he was in high school, he was going through confirmation classes, and he said to my wife and I, "Hey, do I have to keep doing this?" And so we said, "Okay, step out." So he came to it on his own, without somebody kind of saying, "You got to do this." He came to it on his own. And I'll tell you, Jack, it was 2017 when he was confirmed, when he started kind of going through, classes and kind of learning a lot. And then it was May of 2018 that he was confirmed into the church. And 2 months later, he was diagnosed with cancer. And my wife and I have always talked about it. If Mac had not kind of come to this peaceful place of faith and belief and, just wanting to learn everything. I mean, he was an avid reader and just wanted to read and read and read and read. If he had not, if he was still in that sort of dark, sort of lost place when he gets hit with a cancer diagnosis, it would have been much, much harder for him. But he was at peace. He was, feeling confident and strong. And I think he always had faith that he was going to, persevere no matter what and fight through this. And he never lost that faith. I think he just lost the strength in the end because his body was so impaired, and it was getting harder and harder physically for him. But I will tell you this: Resurrection and Revival Part 1 was finished in December of 2023. And later that month, Mac went into the hospital and died 6 days later. So he was happy at the end that he had completed this mission of making this record and that it was beautiful and it was moving to people. When he went into the hospital, he was playing the music on his phone for the nurses, and telling them to go to the YouTube channel, and they would go and watch those videos that you've seen there, and then come back into the room with tears in their eyes, just crying, so moved. And he would just smile, he was just smiling. He was in there for 6 days, and the first 3 days, I thought we were gonna get through it again. We'd been through the hospital so many times, and we would get through those hospital visits and then go home. And I was always in my mind, in my heart, thinking that that's what we were going to do this time. But then it got harder, and I know he was tired at the end, and but I do know that he was satisfied with what he had done and what he'd accomplished. And it's beautiful when you listen to the music, knowing that that was all done in the last year of his life.
It's that beautiful soul shines through in the music on YouTube. You really feel it. It's so powerful. So powerful. And one of those songs, I want everyone to go out and for sure order Resurrection and Revival Part One, Part Two. The songs are just so moving. Um, there's a cloud surfing, also Mac on harmonica. Tell me about cloud.
No, Mac isn't on harmonica on cloud surfing, but that
In the video, maybe is it on the video? Is he on? Does it look like he's on there?
um no, well maybe they show a shot of him playing, but he doesn't play on that one.
Okay.
I think he just sits there and listens and smiles or something,
Right.
you know. That one was another song that he like resurrected and revived from something that he'd written years before. That's where the resurrection and revival came from. Mac used to work for the foundation, and he would kind of resurrect old artifacts that I have that people have given me over the years and collected photographs that were like he was resurrecting, like the photograph on the album right there.
Yeah.
That's my grandfather.
I was going to ask you about that. I was curious who that is.
That's Mac's great grandfather, Daniel Sinise, training to go to World War One.
Wow.
And he fought in World War One, and that's a photograph. We have photographs that go back to 1917, and one of the things that Mac would do is work to clean those photographs up, to bring them to life, to revive them, resurrect them,
Wow.
and it was a perfect fit for the cover of the album. And that's his design on the front and back. And that's why on part two, all we did to change it, that's Mac there. You can see him kind of faded there. He designed that. All we did to change the design on part two was just put part two on there underneath Resurrection and Revival. So
Yeah.
The next album just says part two.
Yep. I think, and the part ones now say part one, right?
No, it doesn't say part
doesn't
one
at all. Okay. Okay.
but that's part one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, my part two is inbound. And then after Mac passed away, you mentioned it earlier, but you started going through these files and you started finding these things. And I think even some messages that he left for you and the family in there. What was that like going through? Because that's something that you really couldn't have done 30 years ago, 25 years ago, in this kind of a way.
No, there may have been papers or something like that, but
Letter.
and there were. I mean, Mac in 2022, he had to go into the ICU. You know, we were always going to the hospital to have something done. You know, there were things that were breaking down, and we'd have to get things fixed. In November, right around his birthday, in fact, he was in the ICU on his birthday, November 2022, where he had to have these tubes put into his kidneys. They're called nephrostomy tubes because his bladder was given out. And and to drain everything, they had to put tubes directly into his kidneys. And he was in the ICU for 10 days during that period. And I think he really started to think, this could be fatal, what's going on right now. So at that point, shortly after that, he wrote letters to the family, a letter to his sister Ella, a letter to his sister Sophie, a letter to his mom, a letter to me, a letter for all the family and friends. And he gave those to the person I mentioned, who was kind of his Catholic mentor, therapist, named David. He asked David to hold those. But after he died, I started combing through everything. This is Mac's iPhone, and I have it. I keep it right here with me, and I started going through his iPhone, his iPad, his Dropbox files, all these things, just looking for messages, just looking for what's in here. I need to know what Mac has in these files. And I started to find all kinds of things. I started to find voice messages on the voice memo on his iPhone, messages that he would just be thinking of something and he would just put it into his voice memo. I found melodies of songs that he was writing in his head that he put into his iPhone that eventually turned into full-on music that is now on the new record. I found video messages from him of things that he was thinking and wanted the family to know, but he didn't want to show them to us. He just recorded them and then left them there. And I found a gobload of music that he had written and tucked away. Some I'd heard because some of it was for the foundation. Because when he came to work for the foundation, I said, why don't you write some music for our videos? And so he started writing music for our videos. There's a documentary that our video guys did about me and my early veteran stuff, going back into the 80s. And all the seeds that were planted in the 80s that, that's where a lot of what I'm doing now comes from. It goes back to the veterans of my family and all this stuff I was doing in the 80s. And so they decided to track all that history so that our staff would have a record. This is where the foundation comes from and everything like that. And Mac wrote music for that. And the documentary is on the website, the foundation website. It's called Always Do a Little More. And about 75% of the music that that's in the documentary, Mac wrote. So I found all that, but then I found all this other stuff that he wrote for the foundation that I'd never heard. It was never used. It was just he wrote it and tucked it away. And then I found songs that he wrote after college. I found charts, charts that he'd written on his computer sitting in his hospital bed, hoping one day they would be recorded, but they never were. But I found them. I found the charts. I found music going back into his college days that he wrote with friends and recorded with friends. So, Jack, I'm sitting there on this treasure box of musical wonder, and so much of it is so good that I called his buddy who had worked with him on the first record, Oliver Schnee, and said, Oliver, I need you back in Nashville because, and he lives in Los Angeles. I said, please come back because I think we have another project here. There's a lot of music, and I want to do another record. So Oliver came back. I played him the stuff. He started, just going nuts. Beautiful stuff. A lot of the orchestral stuff. Some of it was kind of short snippets of little things. So we wanted to tie it together. So I said, Oliver, these are Mac's melodies. These are Mac's ideas here. Let's expand them. And so we created out of a bunch of cues that were like, music cues in the Always Do a Little More documentary. We took all that and we blended it all together with some new lines, new music, expanded it, and we created the Always Do a Little More suite that is on the next record. It's about 7 minutes long, all Mac melodies and all that with some new writing from Oliver. There's so much beauty on the record that I just can't wait to share it with people and have them hear it. And I'll probably be living with this music for some time. I hope I can get orchestras to play it and go tell the story of Mac. And there's beautiful rock tunes on the record. There's jazz stuff. It's all over the map.
Amazing. I want to ask you about three in particular on this record, and that's Waltz for Addicts. Where did that name come from? And then, of course, you as you mentioned, it inspired was it the short animated film? Is that right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did that name come from? What was the story behind Waltz for Addicts?
I think, I'll tell you this, and I share this story in my book, so it's nothing that is a family secret or anything like that. But in my book, I tell the story of a very difficult time that our family went through when my wife was she was under the spell of the demon alcohol, right? And alcohol had wrapped its fingers around her neck and wasn't letting go easy. So she had to go into rehab and treatment. This is back in the late 90s when our kids were younger. So she was addicted to alcohol. And Mac had a very, I mean, Mac's relationship with his mom was so beautiful and wonderful. And I think he wrote that piece in some way with her in his head and what she had gone through wrestling, looking at herself, in the mirror. And if you look at the animated feature, a mirror plays a prominent part. And there's a joy at the end, but there's a dark period inside the animated short. And it's a very haunting piece that he wrote on piano, and wrote all the cello parts, the violin, everything. And as I said, he really wanted to write for film. Well, he played it for a good friend of his who was in the screenwriting department at USC. And he played her the song, Waltz for Addicts, and she was blown away by it and started having all these screenwriting ideas. And so she wrote a little script for a little animated short that is right there on Max Sinise YouTube. The animated short is there, along with the music video for Waltz for Addicts of Mac conducting the ensemble with the singers singing his lyrics and everything. He wrote all the music, wrote all the lyrics. They made the animated short, ended up going to a bunch of film festivals with it, and they won a bunch of awards at all these different film festivals. And this was the last Mac's senior year in college. And when you see it, when you see the animated short and you watch the behind the scenes, which is right there on the YouTube channel too, and how they did it, it was stop motion animation, very difficult stuff. These were young students, kids, and they created this Mac made this beautiful music. They made this beautiful animated short. Mac wrote the score for the animated short. And so that's been living on the YouTube channel for a while. And I thought, you know what, that's got to go on Resurrection and Revival Part 2. It's got to be a part of the record. So the YouTube for that piece is right there on Max Sinise YouTube.
Quasi Love. What's the story behind that one?
So we call it, Matt called it Quasi.
Quasi.
Yeah, we know it's Quasi, but he created a rock tune and he wanted it to be Quasi. So and this song was the last song that he wrote. And he wrote it right around the time, just before he started teaming up with my violin player, Dan, to sort of flesh out Arctic Circles. He had been playing with this and he wrote a chart. He sang the melody into his phone, and he said, Dan, while they were working on Arctic Circles, he said, I've got something else I want to show you. And so Mac showed him Quasi Love, and it wasn't fully fleshed out yet. And Mac was thinking it maybe go this way and stuff. And Dan said, no, Mac, this is like a rock tune. It's like a rock anthem. And Mac's a drummer and he likes banging on drums. So he thought, hey, that's a great way to go. So after he died, I found it. I found the chart. I found the voice memo of Max singing the melody into the phone. And I found some text messages between him and Dan talking about it. So Mac had never told me anything about it. So I went to Dan and I said, Dan, what I've found all this stuff on Quasi Love. What is that? And so Dan started to tell me, oh yeah, we were tooling around with it and everything. And I said, Dan, finish the song because we're making another record and I want that song on the record. And we have a one of the videos I sent you today, Jack, is the video of the making of the recording of Quasi Love, and all my band is on it. And I decided I'm going to call up. Remember, I told you about all those drummer roommates? I called all his roommates up. I called his guitar players up that he played with in high school and college. And I said, I'll fly you guys out here. Come out here. I want you to be on this record to play for Mac. So when you watch that video, you see his drumming roommates, his drumming guitar players. They're all doing all the rhythm stuff on that record, and I play bass on it. And my horn section plays horns, and Dan Myers sings the song along with my band on the big chorus and everything like that. It's a rocking tune. My band is now playing that tune in our set, and it's really a fun one.
Quasi love, that quasi love, that quasi love, quasi love, quasi love, that quasi love, that quasi love that you do.
Love be existential. You sure that's all you got? I'm saying all of it essential. Girl, I ain't playing if it's not. Quasi love, quasi love, quasi love, that quasi love, quasi love, quasi love, quasi love, that quasi love.
That's incredible. Yeah, you sent that over right before we jumped on, so I haven't heard it yet. And then I think you also sent me Sweep Sweepin' right before we jumped on.
Yeah, Jack. So Sweep Sweepin' is one of those charts that I found. So after Mac did Arctic Circles, I think one of my horn players said, "Hey, if you ever want to work on a big band tune, let me know." And so that got Mac to thinking, a big band tune. And so again, on his phone, he starts singing a bebop diddly doodly, melody into his phone, and then he writes a chart for it. And he wrote the whole chart for the whole melody of what he wanted there. And so I found the chart, and then I found the voice memo. So I took the chart and I gave it to my piano player, Ben Lewis, and I said, Ben, can you play this for me? When we get to sound check, can you play it for me? So we were doing a gig in Phoenix, I think, and I went to sound check, and that morning Ben had worked on an entire arrangement for the song so that he could, not only would he play it for me on piano, but he had the whole band play it. And so I just sat there and they played Sweep Sweepin' by Mac Sinise for me right there. And it's a beautiful swinging tune that we put on the record with a horn section, guitar player. My band sings this little line in it. I don't know where he got Sweep Sweepin'. I wonder if our housekeeper, who's been with us for 30 years, like his second mother, and she may have been in there sweeping the floor or something. And you
never know what these things.
I'll call it Sweep Sweepin'. That's what it'll be called. Who knows where that title came from? I don't know, but it's a really fun swing and big band tune.
also wanted to ask you about, is it Shane Fogerty? Is that from the son of
Yeah.
the Creedence Clearwater Revival? That did he play with him in college? What was the story behind that one?
Well, Shane is John Fogerty's son.
Yeah.
So Shane and Mac were buddies at college. They went to the same music program, the Thornton School of Music, and and so Mac was in songwriting classes and music theory classes and composition classes, all these different things. So the pop music, this is the pop music program at the Thornton School of Music. So Mac went into the pop music program. So everybody there is doing pop music stuff and rock music stuff. And part of what they had to do is, go off and write songs together. So he teamed up with Shane, and Mac had, it turns out that they were both big fans of Ennio Morricone and the scores that he would write for the Sergio Leone westerns, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and stuff like that. And there's a very specific guitar sound in those soundtracks and everything like that. And Shane's a guitar player. Well, Mac had written some lyrics and had some musical lyrics ideas. And so the two of them both were big fans of that. So they decided to write this song called Gunslingers of Xanthia, which is a song that I found in his files. I had never heard it before. My wife had actually heard it because she went to the pop music program performance that Mac actually got up and sang the song. Mac doesn't play drums on it, he sings on it. And there are two songs on the record that he actually sings on. But he and Shane created this song, and there's a nice little piece in the copy, the text that's inside the album. There's like a booklet in the album of messages and story about all the music and everything like that. And Shane actually wrote something really lovely about putting that song together with Mac, and he sent it in. That's kind of a rockin' tune. The other one that Max sings on is a cover tune of the old Nat King Cole classic called Nature Boy. And Nature Boy was a big, big Nat King Cole hit in the 60s. It was written by this guy who lived out in the wilderness, uh, and he wrote a song that turned into a classic by Nat King Cole. Well, Mac did a version of it where he plays all the instruments and he sings on it. And so I wanted to put that on the record as well. It's beautiful.
Amazing. I cannot wait to get mine here just in a few days. I did want to ask you also about, you've talked about your faith, Mac's faith. Do you think that all of the work that you've done with veterans over these years, and seeing what they've gone through, Gold Star families, those dealing with the physical and emotional trauma of the battlefield, did that prepare you for what you dealt with your own family, or help?
Without question. There is no question. Having been in the hospital so many times over the years, having seen these broken families dealing with a lot of really hard stuff. You know the drill. I mean, a lot of really broken people that are just trying to persevere through all these physical challenges and mental challenges and all the things that they go through. Multiple years in the hospital, multiple surgeries. You and I both know guys that have been wounded who have had hundreds of surgeries. I mean, not just a couple, but multiple over the years, because they're constantly going back in to get something repaired that's falling apart.
Yeah.
And that can be difficult on them. It can be difficult on the family. Yet I've seen so many of them just, never quit attitude. I'm persevering through it. I remember my first trip to Walter Reed, Jack. First time was September 11th, 2003. First time I'm going into the hospital. I'd been to Landstuhl two weeks before that. I was in Germany doing a visit and visited folks in Landstuhl. And now now September 11th, 2001. I remember the hospitals used to be separate, right? Walter Reed was one thing, and then Bethesda
Right.
Naval Medical was its other thing over here. Now they're combined. But at that time, there were two hospitals. So in the morning, I went to Bethesda. In the afternoon, I went over to Walter Reed. So I'm seeing banged up people at Bethesda. I remember two guys who were serving in Africa. They both had malaria and they were on these ventilators and they were just trying to survive and their families were there. I just got there. They didn't know, the soldiers didn't know I was there, but the families did. So I started seeing all these really hard things, traumatic brain injuries and severe burns and just, multiple amputations and one thing after another. It was hard stuff. But the more I did and the more I could see that it was helping them by me showing up, I just kept going back and doing it. And I remember going to Walter Reed that first time and seeing a guy. He got blown up, lost one leg. I have a picture of him in my office. Lost one leg, was trying, the other leg wasn't doing so good, but he got out of the hospital with the other leg still intact. 10 years later, I'm in the Matsy, right? And I'm visiting them. That's where, do all the physical rehabilitation and everything like that at Walter Reed. And I look over and there's this kind of heavy guy, double amputee, and he's working out in there, working out. And I look at him and I say, wait a minute. We met 10 years ago when you were here. You were a skinny guy missing one leg. Now you're missing both. And he said, yeah, I came back just last week to get the other one taken off. He tried to hang on to the remaining leg for 10 years and just bummed around with it, trying to salvage it. But he came back and had it taken off. These people can be in and out of the hospital, as you know, Jack, for just multiple years, and their families are going through all that and over and over and over. And I've just seen them persevere through just tremendous challenge so many times I can't even tell you. And that has given me a lot of strength. No question about it. When all of a sudden I'm faced with my wife going in for multiple spine surgeries, spinal fusion and all this stuff. I'm living in the hospital with her. My dad, I was in the hospital with him after his stroke for 4 weeks in the ICU with him. Then our son, and multiple surgeries and staying with him in the hospital over and over and over again and just trying to duke it out. I know that God prepared me for our own family's challenges by, just sending me on a mission to try to do something positive to help our defenders out and their families. And all that is manifested into just some great things at the Gary Sinise Foundation. We have so many supporters now that are helping us do this great work. We've raised $500 million in the last 14 years or so, deployed those funds all over the place to do a lot of good things. We're about to give away our 94th specially adapted smart technology mortgage-free house. This is the 94th house that I've been involved in. The foundation has done about 70 some of those. I started before I had a foundation. So we count that as, part of the total number. But we just gave away our 93rd about a month ago, and now we have our 94th house. So a lot of great programs at the Gary Sinise Foundation. It all came out of what I was doing, and I've just met so many people that have shown me the way, and I've just tried to rely on that a lot.
That's incredible. I was going to ask you about that mortgage-free home. And then also there's a hurricane relief fund at GarySiniseFoundation.org, and all the links to all these things, to Max Sinise on YouTube, to Gary Sinise Foundation. All this will be in show notes, easy for people to find. And I encourage them to spend a lot of time on that website, going through the message that you wrote after Mac's passing, but everything else on there as well. It's just incredible work that you've done over all these years, over all these decades now, for others, for veterans, for our country. And I want to pass my sincere thanks. And as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask you about something that you wrote, and you said that Mac focused on what he could do, not what he couldn't. When I read that, I thought there's such a beautiful lesson there for everyone.
You know, he got very good at that as time went on. In the beginning, I think it was a little more challenging for him. But as time went on, Mac um, really got um, to be the kind of person that was just gonna like today, if I'm feeling good today, I'm not gonna waste it thinking about that I might not feel as good tomorrow. You know, he's just going to enjoy that he feels good today, and what can he do with that time? Because when you're going through cancer treatment and got things breaking down and there's new tumors all the time and all this stuff, you never quite know if you're going to have a good day or a bad day. So he got pretty good at just kind of, okay, today is not a good day. I'll deal with that. I'll get through it, and we'll see what tomorrow is going to be. And when he would have those good days, he would just persevere through it. And so he got very good at thinking about, what can he do today versus what is he not able to do. And he knew he couldn't take care of himself. We had to have round the clock nursing care for him. I had nurses in there from 9 in the morning to 4 a.m. And the night shift would leave at 4 a.m. And then I'd get up about, 5 or whatever. And then the next nurse would come in at 9 a.m. And we had to have round the clock care for him because, I couldn't always be there. I was trying to, my task during all this, Jack, was to try to figure out what we were going to do next if what we were doing now uh, didn't work. Mac went through 25 different cancer drugs during the 4-year period, and nothing really shrunk any tumors or stopped any tumors from growing. Um, Occasionally, we might, you do a scan and then you do some more treatment, and then you do another scan, see what happened. Occasionally, we might have a scan where there wasn't a lot of progression. So that was a good scan. If we didn't see a whole bunch more tumors, that was a good day. Um, but there aren't any drugs to really kick back chordoma cancer the way there are for like breast cancer drugs and other things that have been more effective against those types of cancers. But when you consider this, that maybe 90 people per year in the U.S. get metastatic chordoma, what pharmaceutical company is going to spend any money to develop a drug, um, to fight chordoma? Thankfully, there is a foundation called the Chordoma Foundation that was started by a young man who had chordoma when he was 18. And they successfully removed the tumor and it didn't come back. 16 years later, it came back again. But between that time, he was fighting to find treatments. And so he started a foundation, the Chordoma Foundation. And we've started some funds there to raise money for the Chordoma Foundation to help. Without the Chordoma Foundation during this fight, we would be just spinning. But the Chordoma Foundation was a go-to resource for, where are the drugs, what doctors are dealing with things. And that was the kind of stuff that I was dealing with all the time so that Mac could just have a good day, not think about cancer, not think about what drug we're going to try next, not think about talking to the doctors. I was doing that. That was my mission, and I was like a battle buddy with Mac, and losing him was like losing my battle buddy, who was wounded, and I'm in the trench with him trying to keep the enemy, from jumping in the trench.
And as we finish up here, I wanted to ask you about Mac's favorite quote from St. Augustine, which is in here in the record right here. And it reads, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you."
Yeah. That quote it's a beautiful quote. He loved it. We actually made at one point when we started the campaign at the Chordoma Foundation to raise money, and there are still, there's two campaigns at the Chordoma Foundation. One is the Mac Fund that they started after he died, and it was started because one of our donors at the Gary Sinise Foundation called up after she read the story that you mentioned that's in the website, and she was heartbroken and said she wanted to make a donation to honor Mac and wanted me to decide what to do with it. So I donated a portion of it to the Chordoma Foundation, and they started the Mac Fund, Moving Ahead for Cures, Mac.
Wow.
And that is there. And the first campaign we decided was going to be called the Team Mac campaign. And again, Jack, you mentioned that I never talked about this publicly, what we were going through. We started the Team Mac campaign for family and friends who were aware of what we were going through, and they wanted to know what they could do and how they could help. And so we created the Team Mac for family and friends. And, we raised a good amount of money on the Team Mac campaign page. After I decided to reveal what had happened, the story that you're talking about came out in February this year. A lot of people went to the Chordoma Foundation to see what it is. What is Chordoma? And so they started raising a lot more money. And we had made T-shirts, Jack, that said "All in for a cure" on the front, and on the back, it was, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." And that was on the back. That was Mac's favorite St. Augustine quote, and that's actually, we buried him at Calvary Catholic Cemetery in Nashville, and there's a gravestone there, and that quote is on the gravestone.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing this story. I know it's going to help so many people because everyone's going to deal with some sort of adversity. Cancer, unfortunately, affects so many people today.
Everybody.
And there's a touch point. It's so heartbreaking. But the way you dealt with it as a family, the way you've shared his story, the way that his spirit lives on through his music and through the videos on his YouTube, it's astounding. It's incredible. It's moving. It's inspiring. And he's going to help a lot of people, just like you have. So, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and thank your family. And I know we'll be texting you, and I'll be talking to you, but hopefully I'll link up and I'll see you in person very soon.
Jack, you're up north, right?
We're in Park City, Utah these days.
Is that where you're living, bud?
That's it.
Well, it's possible that I'm starting to schedule concerts. It's possible that I'll be at Hill Air Force Base.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, right down the road.
So if I am, I will make sure to let you know. And I just want to thank you for having me come on to talk about Mac and to play as much of the music that you're doing here and showing these videos and everything. He was a special guy. The music is beautiful, and sharing the music has really given me a great direction. Maybe in some ways he left me all these treasures to find, so I'd have something to do.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing them with the rest of us, and thank you for sharing Mac with us. And prayers to you and your family.
Thank you, Jack.
Take care. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to watch another episode, or click here to watch a clip from the podcast.